the shooter.
The officer was unharmed. The two students who were shot are in the hospital. A female is in critical condition, a male in stable condition. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Mississippi's governor will appoint the state's first female member of Congress to fill the Senate vacancy that will soon be created when veteran Senator Thad Cochran retires. That, according to sources close to the situation. Cindy Hyde-Smith, a 58-year-old Republican, has served as the state's agriculture commissioner since 2011. Once appointed, Hyde-Smith will immediately be running for re-election for the nearly 3 years remaining on Cochran's term. The Minneapolis police officer who shot and killed an Australian woman in July has turned himself in after a warrant was issued for his arrest. Here's Fox's Jeff Manasso.
Investigators say Justine Ruszczyk, minutes after calling police in July of a possible assault in her alley and approaching the responding police car, was shot through the driver's side window by Officer Mohammed Noor, who was sitting in the passenger seat.
Can we get EMS code 3 going down?
Acknowledge shots heard and one down.
The 40-year-old life coach, who was set to be married, died. Noor, who was hailed as the precinct's first Somali officer, refused to speak to investigators, and who, according to the Hennepin County jail roster, is now charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
And for American Family News, I'm Steve Jordahl.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. It's my pleasure to be with you today, and I have a jam-packed program. We have a huge discussion we're going to have this hour about why researchers are talking so negatively about how black boys are never going to catch up to their rich white counterparts. I'm going to tell you why they're saying those horrible things about black boys and what we can do about it, because there are definite actions that we can take as parents, as Americans, to not just improve the lives of young black boys who are in the educational systems around this country and have an opportunity to take part in the greatest experiment there's ever been on the face of this planet, which is America, and everything else. So we're going to talk about all of that. Right now, I want to just point you to our first guest of the day. We have a couple of different things going on. We have Megan Stifel. She's a Hoover Institute Fellow, former cybersecurity policy advisor to the White House National Security Council. She's going to come on today and talk to us about the Cloud Act. And we're also going to talk about Sessions possibly renouncing his recusal, and why are people asking about that? A Democratic congresswoman or congressman suggests to a lady at a forum that the Second Amendment is a way to oppose Donald Trump. Does that sound crazy to you? Yeah, because these are the same people who want to repeal the Second Amendment. They're now saying they'll use it to oppose President Trump. And then we'll talk a little bit about McCabe, updates on that. And I want to also point to the school shooting that happened in Maryland. Please be praying for the families of the two people who were, well, it was the resource officer and two students were shot. The resource officer actually did his job and returned fire and killed the student who came there with a Glock, I think Glock 17 or Glock 19 handgun, and he used it to open fire on the students, and he was summarily put down by the school resource officer, which is as it should be. But again, you have to wonder what's going on with that building. How there are a number of questions that remain unanswered. And then, of course, other news that has been popping today, obviously a fifth explosion in Texas, this time at a FedEx facility. So the person who's putting these bombs together is expanding their reach, and they're putting out a bunch of information about that. So we'll cover that as well. So first, let's talk about what we can do with our children today. So you might be wondering, well, what are you talking about? I mean, what horrible things are they saying? And I got really ticked off about this last night. I went on to Periscope on Twitter and I did a quick video. It was like 5 minutes long where I just had to pour my feelings out and get them out of the way, because I'm just so frustrated with this idea that so the only thing that blacks can do in this country is fail, and the only thing, money doesn't matter, your religion doesn't matter, your hard work, your effort doesn't matter. Nothing matters except if you got the permanent tan or not. And you guys know how I feel about this. I've experienced racism. I have talked about it on the air. I've also talked about how, in spite of certain factors and things that I feel like people have tried to do, I've been able to succeed. My husband's been able to succeed. So many other people I've seen overcome huge obstacles and legitimate pushback from people who they've legitimately opposed a person succeeding, and that person has succeeded in spite of that opposition. And so I place it at the feet of the Savior. God gives us the desires of our heart, right? So you want to be a radio personality and you feel like you're gifted with that, but he doesn't just say, I'm going to give you this gifting, I'm going to give you a desire to do this work, and then poof, a little bit of effort, and now you're a radio person. No, you still have to work your way through it. You have a desire to be a veterinarian. That means you need to love science and biology and chemistry, and you have to love doing dissections and putting your hands inside of animals while they're still alive. I mean, you really have to be focused on getting all of the prerequisites under your belt so you can go to college, and then so you can go to college again to be a veterinarian and practice that kind of medicine. And so he gives us the desires of our heart, but we have to say, this is the desire of my heart, Lord, I want to do X, and then we have to go for it. And so let's first unpack this study. And I have to say, the people who work the graphics on this study, amazingly talented artists, because the graphic is so beautifully done. And here's the premise. It's a study. The New York Times is publishing it, but they're not the sponsors of it. And the story is written by Emily Badger, Claire Kane Miller, Adam Pierce, and Kevin Keeley. It talks about black boys raised in America, even in the wealthiest families and living in some of the most well-to-do neighborhoods, still earning less in adulthood than white boys with similar backgrounds. Now, first off the bat, this premise is a load of hogwash. The reason why kids are or are not doing well is not solely predicated on whether they are white or black. And we know that because there are millions of white people stuck in poverty, generational poverty. Look at the Appalachians. Look at some of the rural areas of this country where the heroin epidemic has come in on the heels of the loss of the manufacturing industry and the steel industries and the coal industries in this country. And you see these are towns with basically nothing but white people in them, and they're dying. So the premise on its face is flawed. But let's dig in a little bit further, because we certainly don't want to dismiss it out of hand. They spent a lot of money, a lot of man hours pulling this information together. So they took these children, 10,000 of them, white and black, and they're from rich families. And the conclusion they came up with is that white boys who grow up rich, I'm reading this from these are their words. White boys who grow up rich are likely to remain that way. Black boys raised at the top, however, are more likely to become poor than to stay wealthy in their own adult households. So, when I saw this trending on Twitter yesterday, and I won't say it was full on trending, but it was definitely quite a few tweets about it. I was like, wait a minute. What? They're talking about black boys? Because we have one of those. I'm married to a man who was previously a black boy. What are they talking about? So here's what they've got. They've got the follow the lives of 10,000 boys who grew up in rich families. And then they show each of the white boys is a yellow dot. Each of the black boys is a blue dot, a little bullet point. And they put them in a stream. And when you first access the page, you can see the stream coming over. And once it gets about a quarter of the way over the graphic, to the right of the graphic, towards the center, the streams start pouring downward. The yellow dots, a lot of them stay at the top, and they give you the statistics. Now, I'm just going to give you the ones on the black boys. The first comparison, I'll give you both. It's rich adult. So they grew up rich, meaning a household that's worth $1 million or more. And the white men 1,965 of them, or 39%, remained wealthy in adulthood. 869 of the black boys did at 17%. So the first thing I thought was, well, they're going to talk about the culture, because I don't know if these researchers are aware of this or not, but there is a radically different orientation between wealthy blacks who, especially if their money comes from entertainment or something like that and not from business. There's a huge difference in the culture of those families than there is in the culture of wealthy white families, especially if that wealth is generational and it's, so passed down from generation to generation. So multiple generations of white wealth contrast that with a first generation black wealthy family. Those families are very comparable to multi-generational black wealth families, but even there are some stark differences. And I've covered this on the air before. We've talked about the lack of black wealth and the fact that the wealthiest of black people fall into the top 30% of the wealthiest of white people. And there are very few comparisons between the top 1% of white people and the top 1% of black people. But those are due mainly to behaviors, patterns of spending, patterns of saving and investing, and patterns of, purchasing insurance. It's a huge impact on whether or not you remain wealthy, is whether or not you purchase insurance packages to shield your wealth from excessive taxation from the government. Because if you have to sell your company to pay taxes when you pass away and your heirs are waiting to inherit, and they can't inherit the business which created the wealth because they have to sell it to pay the taxes, and the similarly situated white family does not have to sell their business because the parents, the business owners, which are the parents, purchased enough life insurance to cover the burden of the taxation because it's worth more than $5 billion. Therefore, it's taxed at 50% up until the recent, I'm not sure what they did with the estate tax on the last tax reform package that President Trump passed. But the point is, the government wants 50% of the value of your assets if you die and leave more than $5 million to your heirs. If you don't account for that and you leave $6 million and the $6 million is the value of the company, then you have to sell that company in order to pay that tax burden. That means your heirs are now left only with the liquid assets that you left them outside of that, or the value of half of the company, which is what they would inherit. So if they've not been taught how to save and invest and to pour that money back into another company or do something similar, then no, they're not going to remain wealthy. Does this study account for that? No. I looked through. I looked. The other thing that it doesn't seem to account for, and it does go into some depth. It talks about the next visual is black men consistently earning less than white men, regardless of whether they're raised poor or rich. No income gap exists between black and white women raised in similar black women and white women raised in similar households. So they're saying the black girls don't seem to experience the same negative outcomes. I think that probably has a lot to do with black women and white women moving from wealthy households, tending to marry within their income strata, and because they also tend to have a higher educational attainment level. Because right now in this country, more women get bachelor's degrees than men. More women are graduating with doctorates and going into the medical field than men. And in the black community, far more black women are college educated than black men. So that college education disparity will also transfer directly into the level of wealth attainment that people are able to achieve and maintain, because people with higher educations tend to utilize services to not just grow the money that they earn, but to also invest it and to earn more money. And they're traveling in circles where opportunities to invest in businesses abound much more than middle-class families. You just don't rub elbows with people who need a $15,000 infusion of cash into their business. It's a limited partnership that will then yield you $30 or $40 or $50 or $100,000 later when it's paid off. That just doesn't happen when you're running around in the middle class, shopping at Marshalls and Target, going to Whole Foods, living on the majority of your income and investing only a small portion of it. It's just a different stratosphere. It's a different place where people live. So you keep going through, and you have Nathaniel Hendren, a Harvard economist and author of the study, says, you would have thought at some point you can escape the poverty trap. Black boys, even rich black boys, can seemingly never assume that. The graphic that goes with this story, the one that was tweeted all over, a couple thousand times yesterday on Twitter, says black boys will never attain the same level of wealth as white boys. I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. They are not talking about any black boy that resides here at this house or any of the people that I know or anyone within the listening audience. I refuse to accept that. I will not allow that to go out and be spoken over my son or other good black boys in America. I refuse to accept it. This is a lie from the pit of hell, and it's meant to drag down families at the top income sphere, because what they're trying to do is continue to divide us. If black boys who are rich, running around playing lacrosse and soccer at private schools and attending the same country clubs as their white counterparts, can be made to see themselves as victims, they can stop the advancement and career opportunities of those kids the same way they're crushing black boys in the inner city. You have to be able to recognize when the viper, that demon, the devil, and his little minions are running around trying to curse your children. And that's what this is. It's a high level, really, really finessed, nicely packaged lie from the pit of hell that is an assault on your children. And if you're listening and you're white and you think, well, this sounds horrible, but it doesn't really apply to me. Oh, yes, it does. If they can get the black boys who are playing lacrosse with your kids, if they can get the kids who are in the same book club, same science club, same robotics team, the kids who are even in wealth and investing clubs together, if they can get the black kids to suddenly look at their white counterparts and say, he's going to be rich no matter what because of his white skin, and stop seeing him as his buddy who you play Age of Empires together, or y'all are in the same youth group at church, start looking at each other like enemies, then they've done their job. And we're worried about the Russians. We need to be worried about these liberals and these academics pouring this garbage science down upon the heads of our children, upon the very livelihoods, the futures of these fantastic kids. It's bad enough they've destroyed the inner cities, but now they're coming for the wealthy kids. They won't even let those kids escape and have their own freedom. You have to put a stop to this. You should be telling your sons every day how much you love them, how fantastic they are, and how much potential they have, and how they are the sons of God. Because all of us are his children, and we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us, and not a bit less. We'll have our guests when we get back. Stay right there.
Hi, I'm Will Addison, and we are partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to save babies' lives through ultrasound. Here's how a nurse describes the power of an ultrasound.
Last week, just one example of a mom who came in, was very abortion-minded, and when she saw the picture of her baby on ultrasound and heard that beating heart, it was a defining moment that just broke her, and she said, I just can't allow this baby to be killed.
By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in the womb, she will choose life 80% of the time.
I cannot tell you how many times a baby's life is saved through ultrasound. It's just an incredible tool.
Underwrite a free ultrasound and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. One day my mobile device crashed. Boy, that was a minor crisis around our place because I depend on that thing for everything. So I replaced it with a newer, fancier model. This thing has all kinds of bells and whistles. I needed to back up some of the stuff on my device, so I installed a program on my computer. Evidently, I missed a step in the process and the program wouldn't work. So I had to go back and retrace the process several times. I was running out of patience, but I finally got it right. Sometimes the programs in our life are not working right. A desire to get out of a sinful situation can be much like that. But just wanting to change is not the same thing as changing. You have to follow the steps. In 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 3, Samuel outlines what the Israelites have to do in order to be delivered from the Philistines. Verse 3 says, Then Samuel spoke to all the house of Israel, saying, If you return to the Lord with all your heart, remove the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths from among you, and direct your hearts to the Lord and serve him alone, he will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines. He says you need to do 4 things. First of all, you need to return to the Lord. Number 2, remove the sin. Get rid of it. Thirdly, direct your passions toward the Lord. He wants a hot heart. Then, number 4, serve him. In other words, be willing to do whatever he says. Make his service your passion. Here's what I want you to remember today. If there's a sin controlling your life, by God's grace, take steps to be delivered. It's a lot more important than backing up your phone or tablet.
Crawford Loritz is Senior Pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. For more information, go to livingalegacy.org. livingalegacy.org.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. And so we do not have our guest right at this moment, and that's okay because I still have much more to say about this topic with this study, and I want to continue to unpack it with you. And I have to say, you know, the things that I'm saying about these black boys who are being targeted in this study, they apply to all young men. If you have a son, you certainly love him and you want the best for him in the future. And whether you have $1 million worth of net worth or you have $10,000 worth of net worth, you want your child to do well. The goal in this country, the American dream, is not wealth. It's obviously we all want to attain wealth, but the end goal is not to stack up $1 million. It's not like it's a magic bar where once you get $1 million, everything in your life just goes perfectly well and you never have to struggle again. You never have any problems. You never get sick. You never have upset stomach. You never have a headache. No, this whole arbitrary marker of just examining the lives of kids whose parents have $1 million in net worth completely ignores the fact that some of these parents are probably horrible parents, just like some people who make $30,000 a year are horrible parents. Is it some law that I missed that anyone who has $1 million in net worth or more, they're automatically perfect parents? Their home lives are automatically perfect. There's no drug abuse. There's no alcohol abuse. There's no domestic violence. There's no absent fathers. There's no people they're physically there, but they're checked out. They don't do anything with their kids. There aren't parents who let their kids be babysat by the television, never check up on their homework, don't participate in their activities. Just being wealthy in and of itself means you are a perfect family. I don't accept that. I know that's not true. We've seen the stories. We know it's not true because all you have to do is turn on reality television, Real Housewives of Orange County, and you can see a bunch of people who are worth a lot more than $1 million, and their family lives are just horrible. Their kids are going to great schools, but it doesn't mean their kids are doing well. You can go to a fantastic school that your parents are paying $50,000 a year for and still not come out prepared for college. So I flipped through this whole thing and I haven't seen one space where they say out of the 10,000 boys and 5,000 of them were black, out of those 5,000, this many had been arrested. This many had, failed a grade or transferred to more than one high school. Any of the indicators that parents moved around a lot, the parents lost a significant part of their net worth or went through a financial downturn. They don't have any of that information here so that you can see what the parameters are that surround these numbers. So I said I was going to give you the numbers. So you've got the different categories that they sorted the boys into when they went into adulthood. One of them is rich adult, upper middle class adult, lower middle class adult, and poor adult. And they leave it up to us to kind of, parse those parameters. I know what anthropologists normally delineate as rich and then upper middle class. We've all heard the terms top 10%, top 1%, but those numbers are constantly being updated and finessed because of the changing nature of our economy and the changing nature of the people who occupy those different categories. And remember, in America, we're not like other countries where you can go through and almost track the same 400 families have been in the aristocracy, which is the top 1%. In foreign countries, they have aristocracy. Here we just have rich people. That's what we call them. That these are the families that have remained rich over time. And then you see the middle class and the working class, and those are pretty much static as well because they have somewhat of a caste system where if your family was upper class, it remains upper class because you maintain you have the same land, you have the same title, all that stuff. In America, we don't have anything like that. Well, we do have generationally rich families, but we also have a meritocracy where you remember Steve Jobs didn't grow up rich. He was adopted. So, he was thrown away by his mom and adopted by a family that put him in a program that had him interfacing with a college program for kids who were interested in computers. That's how he opened the door to computing, owning his own business, creating the Mac enterprises and all of the things that went into becoming Apple. So again, that's an American phenomenon. Other people can work their way up into being wealthy in other countries, but it is a strictly American phenomenon that a child who's homeless can be valedictorian in high school, get a full ride to Harvard, and go on to become a Nobel Prize winner and things of that nature. That's an American thing that we do here, which is what makes this study all the more problematic, because they're basically saying that just because these boys are black, that's the only reason that they sorted out of $1 million of wealth or more and into these other categories. So 19% of the black boys ended up upper middle class. 22% of them ended up middle class adults. 20% of them ended up lower middle class, and 1,075, so just shy of the same number that went into the middle class, those boys who were black went into being poor. Now, for the white boys, only 500 of them, or 10%, went into being poor adults from growing up wealthy. And I'm sure if we look, we can find drug abuse or alcoholism or truancy or all of those. We can find a whole lot of negative familial indicators or behavioral choices that were made by the boys who were white or black who ended up in the lower class or poor. We can find those things, but they don't allow us to even consider that, because the main focus of this study is to point out how racist America is. Never mind the fact that we had Barack Obama go into the White House barely worth $1 million. He was worth $1.5 million to $3 million were the guesstimates. He's now worth $60 million just from being the president of the United States. He's black. He didn't grow up rich. In fact, he grew up less than rich. Are we not remembering the background of Barack Hussein Obama, who also went by Barry Soetoro and had a stepdad and, all the stuff, just what a story. But no, we can't highlight any of the successes. We have to go in and say that black boys, even rich black boys, can never assume that they can escape the poverty trap. The study is based on anonymous earnings and demographic data from virtually all Americans who are now in their late 30s, and they claim it debunks a number of other widely held hypotheses about income inequality. Gaps persisted even when black and white boys grew up in families with the same income, similar family structures, similar educational levels, even similar levels of accumulated wealth. And so, again, I point to how similarly we can all look on paper. If you take, like they did, a bunch of anonymous data and look on paper at families, a bunch of families are going to look the same. In fact, I would say I could probably pick 5 families in my age range in the immediate 5-mile radius of where I'm sitting right now. I could pick 5 families that look similar to ours on paper, but then when you get past the paper, pick up the phone, drive over to these houses and interview the people, you're going to find radically different views on what constitutes a good evening at home. I mean, I'm just going to give one example of how radically different parenting can be between families who are not the same race. When our kids were age kindergarten, so from kindergarten, or actually it started in preschool, but we were really strict with it starting in kindergarten up to the 6th grade. The rule was you do not watch television during the week. Kids don't watch TV during the week. And this wasn't something we fought about or argued about, because we implemented it the moment they hit kindergarten. So they could watch, they would say, instead of saying, can I watch TV? Can I watch a show? I'd be like, what's the rule? We have no school tomorrow. Then all bets were off. We also had a set time for homework. You come home, you have your snack, you get to run around the backyard, and 45 minutes after you walk through that door, everybody seated around the coffee table where we had the little school chairs, the kindergarten school chairs that I bought at an antique shop, and everybody sat on those, even the little preschooler who didn't have any homework, and she would color and play with Play-Doh, and the other two one would work on forming letters and numbers and writing, and the kindergartner would do whatever homework she had. And she usually didn't have any, so we would just do some exercises that I would print off or out of books that I would rip out a page, and she would do something. And sometimes it only took 10 minutes, but the idea was I wanted to train her how to do homework and to think of after school as homework first before she did anything else. During the sports season, we switched it up a little bit, but there was still always a set time where you had to do your homework. And then after that, you could read, play games, you could do almost anything. You could go outside, you could go on play dates, but you couldn't watch TV, not during the week. Now, I know other families that made more money than we did at that point in our lives who had the same kids, 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. I mean, lots of very similar things. Husband worked for the same industry type of place that my husband worked for. Wife that stayed home. So no one income family. Owned 2 cars. One of them's a minivan. I mean, very similar families to ours where their kids were allowed to watch TV and they did their homework right before bed. Their kids could watch. The TV was always on. They could watch it anytime they wanted to. And if they had sports, they would do the sports first. Then they would do the homework if there was any. And that's just one small difference. And you might be thinking, well, what kind of, who cares? It matters when you transfer out of public school, whether or not you can do the workload when you go to a very difficult private school. It sifts people out. People who can't sit still for 3 or 4 hours, 4 nights a week to do homework can't make it in a really tough private school. So back to public school you go. And you're saying, that doesn't make a difference. Yes, it does. It makes a difference in the type of grades that you earn, the type of test scores that you end up with, and the type of college you can get into. And that difference can mean the difference between being middle class, upper class, or rich. Also, the type of courses that these kids took. Maybe some of these ones that ended up only upper class, as the chart displays, when they got to college, they did well in high school, they did well in college, but they took African American studies as a major. An African American studies person can graduate and make about $30,000 a year teaching African American studies to some unwitting, unsuspecting group of kids whose parents haven't learned that that's not a thing. But if you go to school and get a degree in biology or get a degree in engineering, any one of the 16 engineering disciplines, when you graduate, you will earn average earnings for a kid graduating from a college that is a STEM school, so it's an engineering school, $69,000 a year. So if you come out at 24, 25, 26, and you graduate and start making $69,000 a year, and every summer before that, you also earned $3,000 a month as an intern, you are definitely not going to have a problem buying a condo, paying for a car, a used car with cash, starting up an IRA or some kind of mutual fund, and saving money, putting you 10 or 15 years ahead of any other average American and catapulting you into a wealthy category when you're in your 30s. These are the things that people need to know. So I would be fine with them saying racism still exists. I'd be fine with them having a study like this and examining the families in the way that I just explained to you, because these families are not all the same. I don't care if they all have $1 million in wealth. How many of the parents were on drugs? How many of the parents were promiscuous? How many of them got divorced and remarried multiple times during their children's childhood? How many of them experienced familial upheaval? There's so much more to examining the similarities between families than they were all worth $1 million and they were all married and they all had college educations. Great starting point, but what else do we know about these people? I just hate to see them use these kinds of things as a way to demean Black children. And I won't have it. So I've just debunked it for you, and share this podcast, share the YouTube stream of this show. Do not allow this to go out and be a part of what people believe about the children of wealthy Blacks or the children of anyone. It's based upon what you're willing to do and how hard you're willing to work and how hard as parents you work to organize your children's lives for success. It's up to the parents, and then it's up to the kids. You can come from a horrible background and decide you're going to get a bachelor's degree in science and that you're never going to be ever with $0 in your bank account. And you can work and you can really make a life for yourself here in America. And that's what I wish they could have gotten out of this study instead of just demeaning Black boys who already have it hard enough with the stereotypes and the garbage coming out of Hollywood and every television screen painting them to be these horrible little demons. They're not demons. They're great kids, just like the white kids and the Asian kids and the Hispanic kids. I've never met an 8-year-old kid who I was like, oh my gosh, you're an animal. Never. I've never met a kid like that. They're all full of potential and they're wonderful, and they need their parents to say that to them, and they need our society to stop downing them and treating them like garbage. They're not garbage. They're wonderful little beings full of potential. And I wish that I could say that to every black boy in America right now. I wish I could look them all in the eye one by one. It would take me years because there's 38 million black people in this country. I still wish I could look them each in the eye and say, you can do anything you set your mind to, work as hard as you can, and go for it. This is the best place to do it. And don't let anyone ever tell you you can't accomplish anything, because you can. No matter what your circumstances, no matter what the background, pray over it. Just speak to Jesus. He's right here. He can hear you. And commit yourself to working as hard as you can. That would go so much further than this garbage science that basically says anyone who's black, especially if you're a boy, you can't make it in this country because white people are always getting their white privilege and they're doing better than you. And the rest of you can just go bite it because you're never going to do anything. So then whatever happened with Barack Obama, whatever happened with Michael Jordan's kids, he has a couple of sons. All of these rich black people running around this country. Stedman Graham, who is the perennial boyfriend of Oprah Winfrey, he doesn't seem to be doing too badly. And yet this is what we're going to allow them to say. I won't allow it. So we're going to have our guest when we get back from the break, because we're up against it. It's 2:39. I want to also ask you guys to please call in and leave us a testimonial, a story, anything. Tell us how Urban Family Talk has positively impacted your life, things that you're doing. You can also go to our website at urbanfamilytalk.com. I've lost my, here it is. Here's my sheet. 877-327-5647. We are dying to hear from you. 30 to 60 seconds. You can tell us what we mean to you. What is Urban Family Talk doing for you? And also head to Urban Family Talk and sign up for our conference, which is at the end of the year. I'll be speaking there along with a lot of the other hosts and some really special national guests. So we'll be back with more. Our guest will be with us, Megan Stifel, right after this.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
My wife Lauren started an annual tradition with our family and friends who gather at our home during Thanksgiving. She asked us all to select a scripture verse and share something that we're thankful for. My verse was Philippians 1:3. Every time I think of you, I give thanks to my God. Thanksgiving is a time of reflection upon the past and a reminder that God has again been ever so faithful. The simple things of life are brought into clear focus. Giving thanks has a way of blocking out the selfishness and focusing on a spirit of gratitude, love, and joy. Today, why not give thanks to God for all that He's provided?
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
My name's Charles. Because of my abusive background, I used drugs to feel comfort from my nervousness and fear. But when I came to Teen Challenge, I began moving forward, knowing that I can live my life drug-free.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
We live in a day when America's families are under attack like never before.
Buddy Smith, Senior Vice President of the American Family Association.
The war against biblical principles rages on numerous fronts. The internet, Hollywood, Washington, D.C., America's corporate boardrooms, and the list goes on. At American Family Association, we're committed to standing against the enemies of God, the enemies of your family. And we recognize it's an impossible task without God's favor and your partnership. Thank you for being faithful to pray for this ministry, to give financially, and to respond to our calls for activism. What you do on the home front is crucial to what we do on the battlefront. We praise God for your faithfulness, and may He give us many victories in the battles ahead as we work together to restore our nation's biblical foundations.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
All right, so we are back, and it is my pleasure to welcome Megan Stifel, Hoover Institute Fellow, former cybersecurity policy advisor to the White House National Security Council. Megan, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Stacy, for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about this. So can you explain to us what the Cloud Act is?
Sure. So the Cloud Act is a bill that's been introduced in both the House and the Senate that would streamline the way foreign governments, certain foreign governments, and the U.S. government obtain evidence to investigate crimes. And the evidence they would be getting is coming from what are defined as electronic communication service providers that are commonly thought of as entities like AT&T and Google and companies such as them.
Okay. And so the Act sets forth publicly a process that the U.S. government must follow in order to enable select foreign governments to access data held by U.S. tech companies. Why specifically do we need that? Is it because of the data breaches we've come to know about through the news and all of that?
In part, that's one reason that there is an effort to pass this legislation. The bigger issue is that in the modern era, companies that act as communications providers now have a presence outside the United States. So what may not be well known to many people in the U.S. is that Google, Facebook, other companies store data around the world. And in order to investigate a crime, the law enforcement community needs evidence. Now, there is a process that allows the law enforcement community to request information from service providers. But in recent years, those requests have been unable to be fulfilled. The service providers have responded because the data is located overseas. So this bill would essentially update existing law and allow for a more clarify essentially some issues in existing law and streamline the process for the law enforcement community and providers as well.
Right. So this is obviously something that is in the House, or is it in the Senate? Where is this bill in the process?
Sure. So the bill was introduced in both the House and the Senate. There is some speculation that it may actually be passed as part of the omnibus bill that's pending right now to continue government spending, or the government, basically keep the government running. It is also, the executive branch is interested in getting this bill passed because of, among other things, a case that's pending before the Supreme Court, which is the United States versus Microsoft. So the bill, the decision in that case is expected, I believe, over the summer. And if this legislation is passed, it would essentially moot the case. So the court would probably not issue a decision. However, if the bill is not passed before the Supreme Court issues its decision, the government will likely probably still seek its passage because the decision would not fully address all the issues that the proposed legislation would address.
Okay, so do you want?
So we could see something very quickly.
I'm just wondering if the listeners should call their Congress people, or what would we do to assist?
Sure, I think reaching out to Congress would be a helpful measure. Among other things, we want to ensure that when law enforcement needs to obtain evidence, that they follow a legal process, one that protects privacy, but also recognizes the need for the government to ensure the public safety. So reaching out to Congress to support the legislation and indicate constituents' interest in continuing our privacy protective approach to communications information in the United States would be a smart move.
I agree. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and discussing this. And I encourage the listeners to go to callmycongress.org, and you just type in your zip code, and your congressional members and all of their phone numbers, including the numbers to the White House, pop up, pre-populates for you. You can actually click it on your phone, and it will dial directly from there. And then you can call and tell them that you want to see them pass this common sense legislation, the Cloud Act, that will protect our data and streamline these processes and bring our laws, kind of update them to where we are technologically, which is sorely needed in these cases. Megan Stifel, Hoover Institute Fellow, former cybersecurity policy advisor to the White House. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks again.
Thank you. So we have just a ton of different stories that I wanted to get to today, and we can weave back in and out of the big, for me, the big issue for today is that study from yesterday. We have breaking news, and we're going to get to that. But if you have something you want to say about that, obviously, we'd love to hear from you. It's 866-963-2037. Those are the call lines, and you can get in there and comment on this study. And if you're looking for the study, it's at the NewYorkTimes.com. I thought I tweeted it out yesterday, but I'll make sure that it's on there at the next break. So it's top of the hour while we're on the news. I'll make sure that it's up so that you can read it for yourself. The shame is that the graphics are so gorgeous, but that these researchers took this as an opportunity to malign Black children and our opportunities here in this country. It's just crazy. That the Black girls don't have the same outcome is proof that we need to pay special attention to these boys instead of downgrading them and bad talking them. So the other big story. This Maryland teen wounding 2 at a school and then dying in a fight with a police officer. So he brought a gun to the school. Let me give you the stats on this. If you're just tuning in, welcome to the show. StacyOnTheRight.com is the website for me. UrbanFamilyTalk.com is where you can sign up for the conference. It's coming up at the end of the summer. And the call lines are open at 866-963-2037. And this is out of Great Mills, Maryland. Reuters is reporting that a 17-year-old student shot and critically wounded 2 fellow students at a Maryland high school on Tuesday morning before dying after a gunfight with a campus security officer. So kind of proof that a good guy with a gun kind of works, right? No sarcasm. I'm being serious here. The shooting, which came amid renewed national debate over gun violence, occurred just before 8 a.m. this morning, and that's Eastern time because we're all on Central here in the Midwest. A 16-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy were wounded and taken to hospitals, and this is per County Sheriff Timothy Cameron. The girl was in intensive care with life-threatening critical injuries, while the boy was in good condition. The gunman was identified as Austin Wyatt Rollins, and there's an indication of a prior relationship between him and the female student, but all of that's still under investigation. And this story goes into a whole lot of drama about the other ones. I want to get to the part about the school resource officer. So we recently had a protest about school violence last week, and now this happened, said Cameron Norwood, a 16-year-old sophomore, as he and other students who had been transported to another nearby high school waited to be picked up by their families. Sheriff Cameron said Rollins pulled out a Glock semi-automatic handgun around 7:55 a.m. in a hallway and shot the students. The attack, which lasted less than a minute, ended after a school resource officer, Deputy First Class Sheriff Blaine Gaskell, ran inside the building, confronted Rollins with both firing a single shot almost simultaneously. So imagine what would have happened in Parkland had that resource officer and then the 3 deputies who joined him later actually entered the building and confronted that lunatic. Oh no, they had to stand outside and listen to the kids die. But anyway, The officer was not harmed, Cameron said. Rollins was confirmed dead at 10:41 after being taken to the hospital. So, then they give a bunch of other examples, and they talk about how usually when the school resource officer enters, the student takes their own life, which I'm sorry, but if just the sight of the school resource officer causes the gunman to stop killing other kids and kill themselves, it's still a resolution. I don't want to see anybody die, but if a person comes into a school and starts shooting, I would rather they turn the gun on themselves than them to be allowed to continue to kill because the school resource officer doesn't want to engage. So, there's some common sense here. More than 29,000 public schools in the United States, or roughly 30%, report having at least one full or part-time school resource officer, according to data from 2013. That is the latest, I guess, data was reportable for a 2015 survey by the National Center for Education. So it's good news that it's over, that they didn't have a standoff. It's devastating for those two kids who were shot. Thank God there weren't more. Thank God for the school resource officer going in and putting the guy down. And so as the day goes on, I'm sure we'll see more, and I'll go check right now to see if there's anything more updated for you guys as you're listening, driving into wherever you're headed in the afternoon, if you're headed off, picking up kids, doing whatever. I'm looking here. They have a lot of news about Trump. No, I don't see anything more about the school shooting. A bunch of information about feds probing Facebook and Zuckerberg hiding and Sandberg leaning out. Yeah, whatever. I don't see anything else about the shooting on here. Oh, and so we'll have to see what develops, what the interaction was between the shooter and the other student, the girl that he, I guess, targeted in this rampage, what was going on between the two of them, and if he was ever a problem, if he'd ever been confronted or had any interaction with the school resource officer, any arrests, any police calls to the home. There's a lot of information that we'll be looking for, hopefully getting to today. And, that's the thing. So if you're wondering about this conference that we're having, quick pivot over to the conference. This is something that our leadership at Urban Family, namely Will Addison, who's the manager of Urban Family Talk, has been wanting to do for a long time. And it's been a part of the vision that he has for what we do here as a ministry to reach out and impact families for Christ. And so it's kind of exciting because this is going to be a conference with national speakers coming in, but also hosts from this network are going to be on the panels and having some discussions. I know Abraham Hamilton III is going to be leading a panel. Miki Addison from Airing the Addison is going to be leading a panel discussion. And I believe they're also going to be speaking. So very exciting to have this going on and to be a part of it. And so I encourage you, if you're looking for something to do in the latter part of August on a weekend and you're looking for great information, please consider coming to our conference. The registration fee is nominal. And I've actually been to Tupelo now, so I can speak from experience. They have very affordable rates for their hotels, and the eateries there are fantastic. We ate at Woody's, and it was delicious. We were treated by Mr. Wildman. It was really great. My daughter and I, when we went down for a share-a-thon. So, I recommend it. I think Tupelo is a great town, and it's a great place to go and visit for a conference, especially we're talking Friday to Saturday evening. So that gives you just enough time to get a whole lot of information, but it's not so long that you're exhausted by the end of it like CPAC. Sorry, CPAC. It just is. So consider it. There's information for you to look at on urbanfamilytalk.com. And I want to give you guys a verse as we're going out of this break. We're going to come back with more. We're a little behind on our audio, so we're going to get to Congressman Jordan, slamming Katie Tur in a fiery interview, and then we'll talk about the bombing attack in Austin as well. But I want to give you this Bible verse. It's Psalm 127, 1-5. It's a song of ascents of Solomon. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. And I take this to mean that there is no mouth here on earth that can form words that can destroy the potential of a arrow in your quiver. So if you have those boys, if you have those girls, if you have multiples of them or only one, I don't care what color they are, what God has made them is what he has made them, and it is good, and they can do all things through Christ. So pour that scripture on. Pour your love into these kids. Turn the TV off. Let them play sports, but keep it in moderation. Open those books. Use those flashcards. Use the internet to play learning games. Set them on the path to being loosed where they hit that mark and they split the other arrows that are in their way. That's what I'm talking about. When you're launching your kids out and you know you've done everything you could do, when you've prayed every prayer, when you've been on your knees, you've cried, you've raised them as best you could, then you loose them and watch God do the work. They're his workmanship. So do what you have to do as their parent and commit the rest to the Lord and watch, won't he do it? No researcher can stop a child of the King. We'll be back with Hour 2 right after this.
Urban Family Talk.
As millennials, we have more than $1 trillion in purchasing power, so you know businesses are watching us. But millennials are losing our faith, so we know Satan is watching us. Engage Magazine is for millennials by millennials, and it speaks to faith, purpose, and a closer walk with Jesus. Because above all, God is watching us. Visit engagemagazine.net and listen Saturday afternoons at 5:30 Central on AFR.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
This is American Family News. I'm Steve Jordahl. A federal court is making the state of Mississippi hold off on implementing a new ban on abortion procedures in the early part of pregnancy. Fox's Eben Brown reports.
A federal judge in Jackson, Mississippi is temporarily blocking the state from implementing a new law disallowing pregnancy terminations in the first 15 weeks of gestation. The law is considered the most strict in the nation. Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant signed the bill Monday. Now the state's lone clinic that performs the procedure is suing, saying a patient who is already more than 15 weeks along had been scheduled for it. Attorneys for Mississippi claim the state is looking out for maternal health and protecting the unborn. Eben Brown, Fox News.
Meanwhile, a California law requiring pro-life pregnancy centers to notify people about abortion may be in jeopardy. AFN's Chris Woodward continues our coverage of a U.S. Supreme Court case that was argued this morning.
The case is National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, or NIFLA, versus California Attorney General Javier Becerra. Both conservative and liberal justices voiced skepticism Tuesday about the law. Liberal Justice Elena Kagan said it seemed that the state had, quote, gerrymandered the law, a term usually used in the context of redistricting, to target the pro-life centers. Another liberal justice, Sonia Sotomayor, said there was at least one instance dealing with unlicensed centers that seemed burdensome and wrong, her words. Elissa Graves is an attorney with Alliance Defending Freedom, the organization representing NIFLA.
In this case, the government is using its power to force pro-life pregnancy centers to advertise for the abortion industry. They're forcing them to post pro-abortion signs in order to refer for abortions. We have had similar laws across the nation, similar to those in California. We have one in Austin, Texas, Montgomery County, Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland, and New York City. These have been invalidated or mostly invalidated. The California case is important because it will resolve the question of such laws once and for all.
The California Attorney General's office has never responded to AFN's request for comment about this case. I'm Chris Woodward.
Austin, Texas police say they've called the bomb squad to investigate a suspicious package at a FedEx shipping center outside the city's airport. Austin police spokeswoman Destiny Winston said Tuesday the package was reported shortly before sunrise. She said federal investigators were called to the scene as a precaution due to past events. A high school student is dead after he shot two of his classmates at Great Mills High School in southern Maryland. Fox's Rachel Sutherland reports.
Police say a student shot two classmates at Great Mills High School in Maryland before a school resource officer gave chase and opened fire. St. Mary's County Sheriff Timothy Cameron says a shooter was struck and died at the hospital.
Through detailed investigation, we will be able to determine if our school resource officer's round struck the shooter.
The officer was unharmed. The two students who were shot are in the hospital. A female is in critical condition, a male in stable condition. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Mississippi's governor will appoint the state's first female member of Congress to fill the Senate vacancy that will soon be created when veteran Senator Thad Cochran retires. That, according to sources close to the situation. Cindy Hyde-Smith, the 58-year-old Republican, has served as the state's agriculture commissioner since 2011. Once appointed, Hyde-Smith will immediately be running for re-election for the nearly 3 years remaining on Cochran's term. The Minneapolis police officer who shot and killed an Australian woman in July has turned himself in after a warrant was issued for his arrest. Here's Fox's Jeff Manasso.
Investigators say Justine Ruschek minutes after calling police in July of a possible assault in her alley and approaching the responding police car, was shot through the driver's side window by Officer Mohammed Noor, who was sitting in the passenger seat.
Can we get EMS code 3? We got one down.
Acknowledge shots fired and one down.
The 40-year-old life coach who was set to be married died. Noor, who was hailed as the precinct's first Somali officer, refused to speak to investigators, and who, according to the Hennepin County jail roster, is now charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
And for American Family News, I'm Steve Jordahl.
Where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. But blessed is he who keeps the law. Our country is suffering because of lack of leadership, division, and a disdain for godliness. Urban Family Talk exists to be a prophetic voice as we speak on matters of religion, family, and culture. We will not be silent on issues plaguing our communities today as we sound the alarm of truth, wisdom, and empowerment. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Love is everlasting, love is only kind, love is always patient, love will blow your mind.
And let's get on with doing what the American people elected us to do.
If the president feels so confidently that he's innocent and feels so confidently it will end well in his favor, and if he really wants the Mueller investigation to go on unimpeded, why is he tweeting what he's tweeting? Why did he tweet what he tweeted over the weekend? Why is his lawyer coming out? Why is his lawyer coming out and saying this investigation needs to end?
But
why is he saying as much as he's saying?
Think about what the FBI did. The top people, the people I just talked about, many of them have been fired, a bunch of them have been demoted. They took a campaign opposition research document, dressed it all up, made it sound like it was legitimate intelligence, took it to a FISA court to get a warrant to spy on a fellow American citizen. When they went to the court, they didn't tell him the whole truth. They didn't tell him who paid for the document. They didn't tell him the author of the document.
That's what Devin Nunes, that's a Republican partisan finding. That's not what the Democrats found in the House
That
Intel.
Is accurate.
They found
Even
that
Schiff's document points that out, Katie.
I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole. We have it in
This isn't a rabbit hole. This is why there's
white.
frustration, I think, from the White House and from so many Americans. Plus, they didn't tell the court that the author of the dossier, Christopher Steele, his relationship. They did tell the court. They didn't tell the court this, Katie, that his relationship with the FBI had been terminated. And why was it terminated? Because Christopher Steele was out leaking information to the press. The same thing Andy McCabe was doing, by the way. They didn't tell the court that.
Congressman, I want to keep you focused on this. And respectfully, let's
keep you focused on the facts.
Let's talk about the way that Donald Trump is handling this investigation, because you were very, very clear about how you did not like.
So that was Katie Tur of MSNBC and Rep. Jim Jordan. And Jim, he never lets them get away with that stuff, does he? He's constantly pushing back and saying, you know what? No, I want to keep you on the facts. She says, I want to talk about Donald Trump. Why did she need to pivot to Donald Trump? Because she was getting killed on the facts. How can she say she knows better than he does when he has access to the classified information and all of the briefings? How can she say she knows better than he does what's going on and who reported what to the FISA court, et cetera, et cetera? Has she been in on those top secret classified meetings? No, She's been sitting on MSNBC mocking Christians for believing in the word of God. You know, Stephanie Rule, as she lifts her cute coffee cup up, she's mocking, Larry Kudlow's inference that if he gets the job and if he's confirmed, it's God's will. And if he doesn't, it isn't. In other words, he's throwing his hands up and saying, I'm here to serve. But if God doesn't have that for me, then I'm not going to do that. Sounds pretty nonchalant and laid back to me. It doesn't sound like anything I need to dispute. If he believes that God's will is going to be done, well, so be it then. I mean, aren't we all supposed to believe that? Well, not Katie Tur, because she says she's a Catholic, but she doesn't sound like she's practicing. So she's, trying to get a word in edgewise, and he just isn't having it. And I thought she made a complete and utter, not so professional presentation of herself. Now, I want to now go to this piece of audio about Getz, who says he wants Sessions to renounce his recusal and force Mueller to put out his evidence. In other words, it's time to call. Lay down your cards. You've been bluffing. Everybody's got their money in the center of the table. Their chips are down. Everything needs to be now out in the open. Turn over and show what you've got. You either have something or you don't. Let's see it. And I agree with them. It's number one.
Congressman Gates, you believe that Robert Mueller should be fired. You don't think the president himself should do it. Can you explain that?
I can. I think that the president firing Mr. Mueller would create a series of conflicts and other downstream effects that would be bad for the country. I think this is the job of the Attorney General, because there's been no evidence of collusion produced by the special counsel, and because there's been a House finding of no collusion in the Intelligence Committee. I think the Attorney General would be right to renounce his recusal, to re-establish command of the Department of Justice, and then to give Bob Mueller a time period to produce the evidence that he may or may not have regarding collusion. And if he doesn't produce it, let's wrap this up and move on to tax cuts and other important things for the country.
But as you know, the investigation isn't over for Robert Mueller, so there's no reason why, again, we don't know if there was collusion or not, but there's no reason why at this point he would have charged something on collusion. He seems to be building a number of cases.
He certainly does. And, Anderson, we're 14 months into the Trump presidency. So let's assume that those who are the president's biggest critics are right and that there was collusion. We shouldn't wait any longer to see the evidence. Let's find out what the evidence is as we stand here today. And if 14 months into this presidency there isn't evidence of collusion, I think it's important to move on. But of course, if the special counsel has evidence, I think every American should be eager to see it.
We should be eager to see it. We should be more than eager. We should be chomping at the bit. We should be running for it, because we need to see the evidence so we can move on. I was giggling because he said tax cuts, like there's some more on the horizon. Can we please have some more? Because I don't really feel like I got my fair share. I looked at our numbers and I'm like, I'm sorry, is this a cut? Anyway, I don't want to be complaining or acting like I'm against it. I'm against not having more tax cuts. So since he said he would, we could talk about more tax cuts if we can get rid of this investigation and get back to the business of the American people. Well, yeah, giddy up. Let's do it. So now I want to get over to Morning Joe. So, just a bevy of interesting comments going on this morning from our cable news individuals. And over on Morning Joe, they're very upset by a poll that shows that most Americans now believe something called the deep state is secretly directing U.S. policy. Now, I don't find that so shocking. I don't find it to be a product of anything the president has been saying or tweeting. I find it to be a product of the actions of Brennan and Jim Comey and Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Loretta Lynch, Andrew McCabe, and others. I believe Americans now are aware of something called the deep state and what it could possibly be doing because of extrajudicial and illegal actions that have been taken on the part of the individuals that I named and others. Huma Abedin, Anthony Weiner, foreign entities that have played a role in different parts of our government without having access or should not have had access. Sidney Blumenthal, who should never have had access to any information from the sitting Secretary of State. This is a web that is enormous. If you want to understand why Americans are really looking out now and seeing something wrong with our government, not that all government employees are bad or that the FBI is completely corrupt, but that there's a problem, just go to Conservative Treehouse and just read. If you spend 30 minutes there, you'll only hit the tip of the spear of the research they've been doing and the dots they've been connecting about what all of this really means. So, of course, Mika Brzezinski was concerned. She had her concerned face on. It's number 3.
In that part may not have criminal exposure.
Or he could be on to something. Attacks against the so-called deep state by the president and some Republicans may be taking hold. More Americans now believe that national policy is being manipulated or directed by a deep state. That according to the newest Monmouth University poll. 6 in 10 Americans believe that unelected or appointed government officials have too much influence in determining federal policy. 26% say the right balance of power exists between elected and unelected officials. While this view of the deep state looks to be growing more prevalent, only 13% of Americans are very familiar with the term, 24% are somewhat familiar, and 63% said they are not familiar. However, when Monmouth described the term as, quote, a group of unelected government and military officials who secretly manipulate or direct national policy, nearly 3 in 4 Americans said they believe that the deep state exists. 1 in 5 said it does not. And I think of the Facebook story and Cambridge Analytica that we're covering. We'll be doing a lot more on that later.
So she's trying to connect this Monmouth poll that shows that Americans are now aware of something, which is basically it's corruption. And so it's been called deep state by President Trump and by many others on the right. And when the people involved are Democrats, then there's no uproar. There's no concern that, you heard Joe Scarborough in the background laughing and sniggering and making light of the fact that Americans are concerned that the government has become it's tribalized. It's a bunch of people who they're on one team and then others are on another team. And we have proof. Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, the 2 FBI agents that were involved in an illicit affair and were texting about their contingency plans. If he's elected, we have a contingency plan. They'd already used the Steele dossier to access Donald Trump's inner circle, and they were trying to ensnare him in something, and they just felt like it's only a matter of time before he does something illegal, and we'll have him, and we'll be able to prevent him from being the president of the United States. Okay, he's in office now, but we'll just keep investigating. We'll find something. We'll dig something up on him. We'll take down other members of Trump world. We'll make them turn against him. They'll tell us the dirt we can't find. If there was anything, we would have seen it by now, would we not? Why would Mueller, seeing his popularity with more than half of the country who just wants to see the entire government move on from this, why would he allow that to go on if he could present evidence that would indict the president and bring closure to this thing? Beyond that, it is not the wish of the American people. I don't think Democrats, regular run-of-the-mill Democrats that you find that you bump into in your everyday dealings, they don't want to see the government parts of the government turning on other parts of the government in a partisan fight over who supports their candidate the most. We're still Team Hillary, so we're going to stay embedded in the FBI, and we're career servants, so we're just going to work this thing out. We're going to get rid of Donald Trump. As much as Democrats that I know don't like Donald Trump, they don't want to see the government collapse or have a crisis in our federal government. Why would they? A crisis in our federal government would mean an economic crisis for this country. Bondholders all over the world would dump our investments. There's more to this fight than just I'm Team Hillary, I'm Team Trump. Which of us is going to win? In any loss that the country takes from the president being impeached and removed, or from there being some huge scandal in the FBI and people having to be indicted and possibly go to prison, that imperils our financial well-being. And it also opens us up on the geopolitical stage to foreign entities being emboldened and empowered to attack us, cyber attacks and terrorism. I mean, sometimes I feel like there's very few people who are actually thinking this thing through. It's one thing to root like that for the Warriors, it's the end of the March Madness and, People are going to be playing. There's basketball that's going to be played, and it's okay to put your jerseys on at your hockey game or at your kids' tournament for basketball or what have you. It's okay to be tribalistic in those endeavors, but as Americans, we should be very wary of any kind of exalting of the different conflicts that are going on right now. It pains me greatly that we're still mired down in this whole thing. And the reason is because it weakens us. It makes us look. We don't have a good look. People from foreign countries are like, oh, it's so dangerous in America. Why would you want to go to America? They have all those school shootings, and now they have bombings all over Texas because people from other foreign countries don't understand the landmass we're working with here. I saw the cutest little joke today on Facebook. It was about how a person who lives in, say, Spain can drive to Germany and visit a relative and stop off in France and be back within 24 hours or within the day from the very early morning, 6 a.m. to like 9 p.m. And in America, someone who lives in Texas can be in Texas and start driving, and 10 hours later, still be in Texas. I laughed because we've all been there, haven't we? If you've ever driven from Virginia to Memphis, so like Washington, D.C. area to Memphis, you're driving across Tennessee for like 15 hours, 16 hours. You're just in Tennessee. You're just driving from one corner to the other, and you're just in Tennessee. And everything's flat, and you're just driving, and you're stopping at McDonald's, and you're taking rest breaks, and you're just driving forever. And so the idea that our entire country is just this, it's so dangerous here, it's so horrible. Well, I mean, maybe that'll stop illegal immigrants from crossing the border and coming in, just because they think it's so fantastic here. But the fact is, it's not horrible, and not all of our kids are in danger from school shooters. And we're going to find this bomber and put a stop to him. But man, I can't understand people who think any of this is an opportunity. Any of this is good. All right, when we get back, we're going to be talking about this Democratic congressman who says the Second Amendment is a good way to oppose President Donald Trump. And more. We'll take your calls, 866-963-2037. Stay there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Well, our June Spiritual Heritage Tour is full, and our September trip is filling up fast. So if you want to go with us to Washington, D.C. and Mount Vernon for our Spiritual Heritage Tour, you need to sign up soon. We're going to be seeing lots and lots of sites, including the Capitol, the Library of Congress, the Supreme Court, the Jefferson and Lincoln Memorials, the Korean and Vietnam Memorials, the Arlington National Cemetery, and much, much more. For all the information on this tour, September the 19th through the 22nd, please go to the website spiritualheritagetours.com. That's spiritualheritagetours.com for all the information. And we also go to Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. That's a separate trip, but we put them back to back in case you want to do both of those tours. Again, that's in September. For more information, go to the website spiritualheritagetours.com.
Hello, this is Bishop Harry Jackson of Hope Christian Church in Beltsville, Maryland. Jesus said you would do greater works than he did. One of the signs in past seasons of revival has been in the great awakenings of the nation. Our spiritual history is punctuated by moments when people come to an awareness that their righteousness is as filthy rags before God. And in the early stages of most of the great awakenings and revivals of our generation has been a period of when people recognize their wretchedness without him. America, we got a long way to go because we do think we're all that. We have an entitlement spirit. I think as God is looking down at America, he sees that same kind of twistedness in the American church. What we need is a move of God that brings us back to the humble place of saying, what I've got, I don't deserve. but I received it because of the kindness and the largesse of a loving God. Now, see, I don't know about you, but I should be dead, not just of adult cancer. I should have been dead through foolishness in my teenage years. I don't know about you, but somehow God spared me. I'm somebody who owes God a debt of gratitude and service. Join us this Sunday morning at 6251 Amadale Road in Beltsville or on the web at thehopeconnection.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
So I know that we have a constitutional system of checks and balances, but what I don't know is if there is a mandate from the House, was from the Congress as a whole?
Yeah, Senate and the House.
Okay, so there's a mandate before the president. If he does not execute that mandate, what does our Constitution say should happen?
How much time is he allowed?
How much time is he allowed?
I don't know the answer to the question. It's it's really a matter of putting public pressure on the president and making it public, which is hard to break through the news cycle with all the different things. And it's probably about going to the courts as well. And then, this is where the Second Amendment comes in, quite frankly, because, what if the president was to ignore the courts? What would you do? What would we do? So,
What does the Second Amendment say?
Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. That's the why we have it. That's the why we have it. Anyway.
Welcome back. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right, here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. Don't forget to give us a call and tell us how we're impacting your life, and leave us a listener story at 877-327-5647. So what did we just hear there? Well, so you've got this, it's like a forum, and you can hear by the audio, they're in this room together, and they're talking and they're asking questions, and they want immediate action on, these gun control proposals, and they want to see something happen. And it's New York Democratic Congressman Swazi. And he says, hey, first when he's asked the question, he says, put pressure on President Trump via the media. You can also sue in the courts, which is actually one of the primary methods that Democrats use to subvert the will of the people, as they set up these lawsuits in these kangaroo courts that are staffed by, liberals are us. They have more liberals on them than Toys R Us has toys in stock. Check that out if you're interested. And so they go, and that's what they do. And so he's recommending that, right? He's saying, you could sue, you could place pressure that way. But then he says, this is where the Second Amendment comes in, quite frankly, because, what if the president was to ignore the courts? What would you do? Well, what did we do when President Obama ignored the courts? We just waited. Then it would go to the appellate court, and then we would wait, and then it would get reversed by the Supreme Court. He was reversed, 38 times during the course of his two terms? 38 times. And then Obama would say, yeah, okay, I guess that's a reversal. But you know why he didn't care? Because it took 6 years to get to the court, or 4 years, or 3 years. And during that intervening time, he would have already gotten what he wanted out of it. 55,000 new illegal aliens, unaccompanied minors per year for 3 years. He got what he wanted. Deferred action on childhood arrivals, illegal edict that he used his pen and his phone to implement, and he got what he wanted. So he didn't care if he was reversed. He was reversed on so much stuff. I was calling him Mr. Reversal at home. When I say, well, Mr. Reversal's up to it again, the kids knew I was talking about President Obama. Come on. And I wasn't the only one. Everybody in town, anybody who read the news and was up on developments in Washington, D.C. knew that it was only a matter of time before the kangaroo courts of the crazy Ninth Circuit and the Fourth and all these other ones, they would be reversed. They get to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would reverse it. You'd even have Elena Kagan signing on and reversing some of the stuff that President Obama was doing. So it's bad when his hardcore liberal jurists are like, well, I'm sorry, but you can't do that. I wish I could side with you, but dude, you can't do that. So the question is spurious on its face. What will we do if he doesn't do what we want him to do? The same thing we did for 8 years. Grin and bear it. Grit your teeth, work hard, do what you need to do to take care of your own self, and stop trying to control everybody else. That's what we had to do. So Tom Suozzi, Democrat, New York, says during the question and answer session with these constituents in Huntington on Long Island, well, it's really a matter of putting public pressure on the president. And then you heard him. After he said the Second Amendment, one of the constituents was such a dunderhead they didn't even know what that was. Oh, what's the Second Amendment again? And he says, oh, that's the right to bear arms. That's why we have it. So if the president doesn't pass legislation that Democrats like, namely repealing the Second Amendment or severely limiting it outside of, the repeal, which we know isn't going to happen, then the Democrat from New York's answer, Tom Suozzi, his answer is that's why we have the Second Amendment. So we're going to have Democrats go out and buy guns so they can take up arms against the president of the United States because he won't pass gun control. Pardon me while I take a hearty sip of my smart water and giggle amongst myself. Honestly, can it get any sillier than what we just heard? First of all, these are the people that want to disarm everyone. So, imagine for a second with me here. If a white Republican in a white district was at a town hall meeting that had been live streamed to Facebook, and one of the constituents said, President Obama is flouting our immigration law, and what can we do about it? And the Republican said, well, that's what the Second Amendment is for. And someone said, what's the Second Amendment? And he said, the right to keep and bear arms. That's what it's for. Can you imagine the calls of racism and all? He said he wants to kill the first black president. He wants Americans to take up arms against the first black president. He's a racist. He hates blacks. That's what we would have heard. And then all the people on CNN would have been like, he definitely wants to kill President Obama. He's a racist. He hates blacks. And that would have been the mantra. It would have been on signs. People with the anatomical hats would have broke out with those. Everybody would have been in unison on the left, stomping their feet and going, Republicans hate blacks. They want to kill Barack Obama. They hate Barack Obama. That is where they would have went with that. Now, you're probably thinking, well, just wait, Stacey. Somebody's going to say how ridiculous it is that he said that. Yeah. So are you interested in when this meeting was? This video was live streamed to Facebook and it didn't go viral or anything. It's just getting picked up. So today's March 19th. This actually was a Q&A session, Huntington, Long Island on March 12th. Just to show you how CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, none of those big conglomerates have picked this story up and said, oh yeah, we gotta highlight this. This was unacceptable. So of course Republicans are saying sounds like he's promoting violence. I have a little bit thicker skin than that. That is what the Second Amendment is for. The Second Amendment is to protect us from tyranny from our government. But specifically, it's not so we can take up arms and go rush the White House, because that's a losing proposition. As someone who's been to the White House 6 times on the special agent tour and now 7 times, my 7th time was for the reception, I can tell you the place is hunkered down. If you don't like AR-15s, you definitely wouldn't like the weaponry that the guys they're in uniform. And I'm not talking about the pretty blue uniform with the red cords going down the pants. I'm talking about, battle dress uniform. And they're strapped and they have on Kevlar and they're sharpshooters and they are there to put down any armed insurrection or any kind of action against the White House. That's first of all. Second of all, the White House is a bunker. I mean, look it up for yourself. There's no way you're taking that sucker. But the reason we have a Second Amendment, since we're talking about it, is so that in the case of the government moving against Americans, we can defend ourselves. And the fact is not so much that it would ever come to that. It's that a government that knows there are 400 to 600 million guns owned by the civilian populace is much less likely to roll tanks through the quiet suburbs or vibrant inner cities of America, because they know it wouldn't be an easy proposition putting people like that down. They also know they'd be at a severe disadvantage trying to take rural areas where there's much more land, much more open space, and the people out there are much more prepared. That's the purpose of the Second Amendment. And so if you don't know your history, you're not only doomed to repeat it, but you're doomed to make idiotic statements like the ones that were just made there. And there were idiotic statements on both sides of that. It makes no sense at all to me for Democrats to talk about utilizing the Second Amendment to defend themselves, even though they have every right to do so, because it's for everybody, not just Republicans, because they don't even understand what it's for. They don't understand that it's not about being bloodthirsty or wanting to harm other Americans or being an anarchist or someone who wants to subvert the government. It's not about the little comments that you see made in mainstream media and on sitcoms about how militia people, they're crazy and they just want to overthrow the government. Militia people don't want to overthrow the government. They consider it their sacred duty and honor to be a part of the standing army of the United States that's comprised of civilians who are ready to support and defend the Constitution of the United States without ever raising their hand to take that oath. That's what they're there for. They're there just in case the Chinese were to ever decide, you know what, it looks like a good time to go into America. That's why they're there. And I don't know any gun owners, and I know quite a few, who are sitting at home thirstily loading their extra magazines, hoping for an opportunity to use a firearm. If you've ever shot a firearm, you know good and well the first time you squeeze that trigger that you never want to have to do it for real. And the more training you get, the more time you spend at the range or in these different training scenarios, as I have done, the more of that you do, the more concrete it is in your mind that you hope and pray, you actually pray that you never have to squeeze the trigger. And that is what happened this morning in Maryland at that school where that resource officer killed that kid. So he doesn't go to bed tonight feeling like a hero. He goes to bed tonight knowing he shot a student that possibly last week he passed in the hallway and said hi. There's never a situation where someone is like, woohoo, I'm just so excited about shooting guns. That's Hollywood stuff. And it's so fun to watch John Wick go into the little, in John Wick 2, he goes into the area for all of the assassins. And instead of ordering wine, he does a tasting, but it's for firearms. And by the way, all those firearms you saw in that clip on John Wick 2, those are all custom manufactured in California. Just miles, driving distance away from Hollywood studios and stuff like that. Why? Because some of their biggest customers for those custom firearms are Hollywood studios. For use in movies. Movies that glorify people like John Wick, who's a paid assassin, who uses the guns, the custom manufactured firearms, Cerakote dipped, beautiful firearms, custom machined. He uses them as an assassin to kill other assassins. And so in the movies, they make it seem as if when people are killing people, whether they're the good guy or they're the bad guy, that they're enjoying it. And I'm sure there are some psychopaths out there who would enjoy killing other people. But for the most part, you meet people who say to you, I was on active duty and I killed the enemy. And that's why I have PTSD. That's why I haven't slept 8 hours in a row since I left the Middle East. I mean, if you sit down and talk to anyone, talk to some Vietnam War vets. Do you know how long ago the Vietnam War was? It was back in the 70s. And if you sit down and talk to Vietnam War vets, they talk to you like it happened 10 minutes ago. I was forced to kill, that's how they describe it. Not, I had so many kills. No one talks like that. No, they say, I had to do what I had to do to survive to come home. So this whole idea, it's like, talking to a bunch of people who are from a foreign country, and they're talking about something that they've never seen before. Or like we're talking to aliens, like an alien who's never been to Earth before, and we travel to their planet and talk to them. That's what it's like talking to liberals about guns. They don't just not know anything about guns. They've been brainwashed by Hollywood to know all the stuff that's not true about guns. And they're so uncurious, so basic, that they won't even go out and find out for themselves. That is it's not a problem for me because I grew up around firearms. My father was in law enforcement. There was always a gun around. I never, ever felt like picking one up. I remember my dad going hunting and bringing back, cleaning the hunt. And I would be there sitting with him talking, as he's cleaning out these, he's killed animals and he's cleaning them out. And I remember on active duty in the military when I was in basic training and we were qualifying on the M16. And I remember laying down, you have to qualify in the prone position. You have to put the firearm up there and you have to steady it. You have to hold it with your hands. And it's cold as the dickens because it's like 6 o'clock in the morning. And you're laying there and you have to control your breathing. They've already trained you. You've already practiced. But now it's the day that you qualify. And you're laying there and I'm thinking, all the sounds of everybody shooting around me have got me so on edge. I'm never going to be able to qualify on this thing. And so, you start doing your breathing exercises and you're calming down. I'm like, you grew up around these things. You know how to do this. You know you can qualify. You have to qualify. You have to get this done. I'm trying to walk myself through it. And I did qualify. I shot marksman that day. But the point is, this isn't something I'm talking about that I just know nothing about it. Liberals are talking about firearms and people who own them, and they neither own firearms nor have they shot them. They know nothing of which they speak, yet they still keep talking. And so not only is it insulting to those of us who actually know what we're talking about, and I am by no means am I the most well-trained individual you're ever going to encounter. There are plenty of people, women, who are fantastically well-trained and certified to teach others, who could speak on this much more cogently than I can. But at least I've fired a firearm and I own some, and I've been through the background check process and I've looked into the laws that govern this, and I know for a fact that they're wrong about this stuff. And that's what makes it propaganda. And that's what makes it so possible when Americans see liberals talking like this about guns. It makes it possible for them to believe that people who are liberals who work in the federal government are doing bad things, the same things liberals are doing about guns. They're doing the same thing in government because they're trying to take down the president the way these liberals are trying to take down the Second Amendment. That's why the deep state is real. It's corruption, but the new name sticks because there's something for it to stick to. You want to change that, libs? Stop acting like you're on Team Hillary and act like you're on Team America. How about that? Okay, when we get back, we have the last segment of the show. 866-963-2037. UrbanFamilyTalk.com/Stacy is where the podcasts are located over there. We'll be back with more right after this.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
My wife Lauren started an annual tradition with our family and friends who gather at our home during Thanksgiving. She asked us all to select a scripture verse and share something that we're thankful for. My verse was Philippians 1:3. Every time I think of you, I give thanks to my God. Thanksgiving is a time of reflection upon the past and a reminder that God has again been ever so faithful. The simple things of life are brought into clear focus. Giving thanks has a way of blocking out the selfishness and focusing on a spirit of gratitude, love, and joy. Today, why not give thanks to God for all that He's provided?
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
My name is Dexter. 2 days in a row while I was using, I heard a Teen Challenge story on the radio, and I knew I should look into this. No matter what lies you've bought, there is hope.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Pastor Joseph Parker. You know, obviously when things are going well, it's much easier to have an attitude of thanksgiving and praise to the Lord. But even when things are going difficult, it's important to know too, there's never a time that's inappropriate for us to thank and praise God. Now some may ask, well, what about when you're going through difficult times, when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death? We can have two different responses. We can worship or we can whine.
Tune in to the Hour of Intercession, weekday afternoons at 1 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Life is never picture perfect. Human beings come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, and abilities. No matter how much we plan, no matter how much we think we're prepared, the unplanned happens all the time. It's how we respond to the unexpected that shows our true humanity. But many do not see the value of every human life. Too many are willing to discard those who don't fit the picture of perfection. Abortion destroys the chance to love and to be loved. We never know what will fill the frames of our lives, or how empty those frames can be when we allow exceptions.
Every life is a gift.
Learn more at www.radiance.life.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Found the information of McCabe lying, thought it was severe enough, even before his final report came forward, to send it to the FBI. Send it to the ethics department of the FBI, the OPR, as you said, the Office of Professional Responsibility. They are nonpartisan, independent. They looked and they believed he should be fired, because every FBI agent I know, he or she believes in integrity. There's so many people that they bring before the court that they uphold because they lie. And they did not want him to take down the own FBI integrity by lying and going forward. But one of the most interesting things I have found is post the firing, what McCabe said. Take his statement, and if I was Comey, I would be worried. Because he said in there, when he leaked to the Wall Street Journal, that it was on the authority of the director and they knew they were doing it. Well, that's in direct opposite of what Comey told Congress in May 2017. When he was asked the question in regarding a Trump or a Clinton investigation, did he ever authorize anybody or leak to information? He said no, never. So we know that McCabe has lied by the independent inspector general found it, and now he's saying about Comey may have lied as well. So I don't think this is the end of it. But that is why we need a second special counsel. And I give Chairman Gowdy and Goodlatte a lot of credit and all those members. They sent that letter to Jeff Sessions. He is looking at it. But we need the ability, because an inspector general does not have subpoena power outside of the direction. So we need somebody to look at this, and not from the inside, because you can't trust what's happening right now.
Welcome. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk. Please head over to the website and hit subscribe at Urban Family Talk so you won't miss anything. And thanks for being with us today. It's Tuesday, really, really full, busy day, and we've had a lot of news stories today. And so I want to just quickly, you were listening to Andrew McCabe. He was actually speaking to Judge Jeanine on Fox News, Jeanine Pirro, and he was talking about this whole thing. We need a second special counsel. I don't really have an opinion on it. I feel like, yes, we do need one, but then again, well, maybe I do have an opinion. We need one, but then again, what will come of it? I would hate to see us spend millions of dollars on a second special counsel and then they come back with findings and we still don't arrest anyone. We don't send anybody to jail. I think the American people feel like if you feel like there was enough evidence to have a special counsel and do an investigation, then it should result in people being arrested and people going to jail. And if that were to happen, a lot of people who are currently operating within the deep state would take notice of that and they'd stop their illicit activities. They would, because nobody wants to go to jail. So that's what, prosecuting people, it acts as a deterrent. It gets people to stop their wrongdoing. And so we need to get back to that. And not that I'm bloodthirsty or anything of that nature, but it's just the rule of law. Either we respect it or we don't. So that's what that was. Now I want to go to the other story that was it's really another big news story for today, and that is a package exploding at a FedEx facility, which may have been linked to the Austin bombings. So that was this morning in San Antonio. So what did I say? Oh, I might have, so it wasn't in Austin. The package was on its way to Austin and is likely connected to the recent bombings in Austin. It contained nails and metal shrapnel. So that's known as a dirty bomb. Fox News is reporting that a device exploded early Tuesday at a FedEx ground distribution facility in Texas, injuring one person, which may be linked to a string of bombings that have rocked the state's capital this month. Schertz Police Lieutenant Manny Casas told Fox San Antonio a medium-sized box was on the conveyor belt when the explosion occurred shortly after midnight. Casas said a woman was treated for a possible sound injury and was released. One employee is being treated for minor injuries after the single package exploded at the facility. They haven't been able to immediately confirm what was inside the package besides the metal shrapnel and nails. And the blast drew a large response from state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies. Agents told the Associated Press that the package was likely linked to attacks in Austin. An ATF spokesperson told Fox News that the officials are processing evidence at the scene and that it is too early to say if this fifth blast is related. This is one of the FedEx facilities. It's about 100,000 square feet. And Schertz is located 22 miles east of San Antonio and 73 miles south of Austin. So that is the story. And it's just, you know, in my opinion, it's just bad news. It's bad that we still have this going on. I was very, very hopeful that they would, you know, be closer to finding something out before the next attack. So we'll just have to wait and see how that goes and keep praying about it. So I want to also give you guys a little update. You know, President Trump met with the Saudi Crown Prince today. They also had a working lunch. And according to the press pool, the U.S. delegation, they were all in the cabinet room around 12:30, and the U.S. delegation was seated opposite the Saudi one and the Crown Prince bin Salman. They were in the middle, and there were 10 people in the room. The brother of the Saudi ambassador to Washington, Prince Khalid bin Salman, Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir, Minister of Commerce and Investment Majed Al-Kasabi, and other Saudi officials were present. The president was asking the prince a few questions about investments and oil prices, and they had a dialogue between the two of them that was unheard by the press pool, and then they officially welcomed him back in. And on the U.S. side, we had Vice President Pence, Energy Secretary Perry, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, White House Economic Advisor Gary Cohn, and Jared Kushner. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly was also present. And the president, according to the pool, was quoted as saying, "It is an honor to have the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia with us and his representatives." He added that he met several of those on hand during his trip last May. So this is a continuation of those meetings and conversations. The president characterized the relationship as the strongest it's ever been, saying that we understand each other. Saudi Arabia is a very wealthy nation, and they're going to give the United States some of that wealth, hopefully in the form of jobs and in the form of purchase of the finest military equipment anywhere in the world. There's nobody even close, he said, speaking of our military industrial complex. On the Crown Prince's father, King Salman said, "I miss your father, special man, and I know he's coming over soon." And he also said, "You are more than the Crown Prince now. We appreciate the investment in our country." The prince thanked President Trump and again talked about the investment. And then the pool was escorted out, and they were not allowed to field any questions with the president. And that's reported by Nadia Bilbassi of Al Arabiya. So that is actually an interesting development. The president had those things. His press briefing has pretty much been dominated by this event. And then this afternoon, he has some other things that he's doing. In fact, they've called a dinner lid, so they've got nothing new until after 5:45 p.m. today. So one of the things that I'm really interested in at this point is whether or not they're going to continue to allow the sham of an investigation to go on. You know, when you kind of talking about the president pivoting back to Mueller, what are they going to do? Like, so is this the new normal? We'll just have this investigation going on until we're all in our 80s and we're still talking about it, or what? I don't know. And then, of course, you know, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross has been discussing the ongoing trade initiatives and kind of the fallout of some of the tariffs that have been levied against some of the countries that have obviously they have tariffs against us, and so we're kind of reciprocating. And there's also a huge focus by Trump administration officials, Ross, Lighthizer, Navarro, Mnuchin, on China's trade theft of intellectual property. And this is super important. And this is why, again, the brain space, as our guest Ariel Davidson characterized it yesterday, the brain space that's devoted to this investigation would be better spent on ending China's ridiculous theft of our intellectual property. So there's a possibility, according to Reuters, that the president is going to levy $60 billion in trade tariffs against China for their IP violations and practices. Now, before you start whining, I can't believe he's going to do that, it's going to destroy jobs. They're already stealing our property. It's like somebody would you let me come to your house and every night when you get done with your work, or every evening when you get done with your emails and everything for work, I come over there and I just take it and relabel everything as if it's from me and send it over to the job site? Would you allow that? No, you would be like, we got to do something about hardening these facilities so she can't get in here. We need to call the police. She's stealing our intellectual property. She's sitting in my driveway on her laptop, hacking into our home network and lifting out information that she's using to better herself. She's stealing from us. You guys would not allow that. So why do we, as Americans, allow our intellectual property to be stolen from us from China just because they provide us with cheap labor and space for our factories? Is it not better for us to simply bring those factories back home and figure out a way to make things work here, or to levy tariffs against them and sanctions or whatever to stop them from stealing? They're making billions off of intellectual property stolen from Americans. So we're over here creating all the cool stuff and thinking it up and making it happen, and they're just stealing it. They don't have to worry about sending their kids to STEM schools or doing anything like that. Which reminds me, and maybe we'll get to this tomorrow, there's this huge story about this immigration bust that's just occurred, and it's these hotels in California, immigration hotels is what they're called. And Immigrations and Customs Enforcement busted up California's maternity hotel. So we'll do this right now. We have enough time. So over at Legal Insurrection, another fantastic website, they're reporting that the Trump administration is launching this attack on California's birth tourism industry. So they raided 20 alleged maternity hotels in Southern California where pregnant Chinese women pay tens of thousands of dollars to live to ensure that they have a made-in-America baby. What happens is they come over while they're still pregnant, and they're saying 60,000 babies a year are born here. The moms travel here in the last trimester, and they have the baby in America, and they get the birth certificate and all the, Social Security number ordered, everything's done, and then they go back to their home country. And then whenever they want, they can come here, and their child can get a free K through 12 education and learn English while still speaking their mother tongue at home. And then they have access to our higher educational system, which is really what they're interested in. Our K through 12 used to be the draw, but now it's the colleges, American colleges and universities, because I don't know if you've ever looked, but I was shocked when we just looked in-state and private tuition. These colleges upcharge for international students. They pay a lot more to go to school here than we do. So they didn't arrest any of the women, but they did execute raids in Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino counties, and they targeted 3 competing birth tourism schemes. The raids were targeting the entrepreneurs who were in charge of the maternity establishments. They're being treated as the women who were pregnant. The pregnant women are being treated as material witnesses. And the investigation was aimed at ringleaders who pocketed hundreds of thousands of dollars tax-free to help Chinese nationals obtain visas, then pamper them until they delivered in an American hospital at a discount. Now, meanwhile, California's Senate proposal, the state Senate proposal to evade Trump's new tax plan is facing scrutiny. Wow. So the 2018 rules going forward no longer allow deductions of certain state and local taxes. So the politicos are attempting to enable Californians to direct money into a state fund designated as a charity and then take the federal charitable deduction. Oh, my goodness. the people who are unlawful are always going to do stuff like this. And they're surprised when we see it. And we're like, that's not allowed. So, So there were mudslides where 17 Californians were killed. 40 Californians died in December from wildfires. And you've got Gavin Newsom, the lieutenant governor of the state of California, lobbing insults at President Trump on Facebook when his constituents are really facing some dire circumstances. I have to say, I'm not surprised it's California and it has become completely lawless, but it's disappointing because you just wonder, you just really wonder what's gonna become of California and the good people who live there. The entire state is not lost. It's just they've got bad management, really bad management. All right, that's the show. You know what? I'll be back with you tomorrow. Please have a great night tonight. Say something positive to your sons. Tell those boys they're awesome and that they can do all things through Christ who strengthens them. And then tell your daughters. All right. We'll be back with you tomorrow. God bless you. StacyOnTheRight.com. See you online.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect